Well, hey everyone, welcome to this week's episode of Certified Forgotten. We are still your horror podcast that talks about films with 10 or fewer reviews on Rotten Tomatoes. It's our niche, it's our specialty. Honestly, it's the kind of shit we want to watch, so we're very happy to be doing it. I'm Matt Monagle, one half of your Matt hosts. I am joined, as always, by my friend, by my co-host, by the guy who watches a lot more horror than I do, Matt Donato. Donato, how you doing at the end of the year?
I'm doing great. And I mean, like, listen, looking forward to a brand new year. And I think we teased briefly last time that, Certified Forgotten's got big plans for 2025. And I think we are starting 2025 off in the best goddamn way possible.
Well, you know what? I think you should just do introductions then. That feels like a perfect segue.
Absolutely. And like, first, I do want to address if you've been listening to the podcast before, you might recognize the title of this film that we're covering, Entrance, because Jackson Stewart did bring it to us. But today's guest wanted to do it as well. And I kind of love the idea that a movie this small has so many champions.
Me
So
too.
we're doing it again. We're doing Entrance again. Like, this is not some weird frequency you've tuned into. This is reality. We're doing a twofer here. And we are doing a twofer because we have a wonderful guest to start off our 2025. You know him probably from his acting roles all over, from superheroes to the horror genre prominently, maybe his comic books as well. Also, maybe you know Dr. Fearless. But enough of that. David Dastmalchian, thank you for being here.
Oh, thank you for having me, guys. Happy New Year. Happy New Year. Hello, all you fiends and horror hounds and movie lovers. It's good to be with you today.
So, David, I am going to ask the first question because this is a personal one for me, and
Fire away.
I need to get it off my chest.
Go for it.
Number one, thank you, because I never in my life would have expected to share a guest with the John Goblikon Right Now podcast. I'm a huge fan of Necrogoblikon, and you showed up on John Goblikon's podcast for the Halloween episode. My question is simple. Were you a fan of Necrogoblikon coming in, and did you know what you were getting into being on a Goblin podcast?
Honestly, there's all this kindred connective tissue between Goblikon and me, but I had never really done anything with them. I'd never, wasn't very familiar with the whole the movement, if you will. But my friend Brendan Small is friends with those guys, and they had worked together on stuff. And I'm sure you know Brendan of Metalocalypse and Galacticon and stuff like that. And then my very frequent writing partner, longtime collaborator, longtime friend partner, Leah Kilpatrick, is friends with the Goblin himself. And so it was like, hey, let's go on this show. And I kind of did myself a favor by literally familiarizing myself as little as possible until after it. And then I was already a big fan once it started. So now I've gone back and digested a lot of it. That was a really fun episode, man. That was so cool.
It is one of my favorites so far. I'm a Necrogoblikon guy, and especially John Goblikon. So to see you pop up there, I was like, they're doing it right across the board, getting David on this for the Halloween episode, and Leah as well, obviously your collaborator.
Yeah, that was really rad. That was super fun, and just like he's unstoppable. Like once the show started, I was like, oh man, we're it's like being on a roller coaster for an hour, and I just tried to hang in there.
Well, I can promise that we're probably not going to be quite as aggressive.
You're not going to throw anything off the table. I'm not going to have to do therapy on you guys. That's totally okay. I'm super excited to just talk about a good horror movie.
Correct. And I'm excited too, because I have no idea what Right Now podcast is. I'm not a metalhead, but that was the first question. Like, we had a list of stuff we were going to ask you, and Donato like tabbed all my stuff lower so that he could have the first question be about that, which I love, which tells you everything you need to know about Matt Donato as a person.
Yes, I get you, Matt. I see you. You are seen.
But one of the first things we like to ask our guests is kind of those first formative horror memories when it comes to, it might have been a movie, it might have been a TV show, a book. There's always that thing folks can trace back to where they're like, this feels different. This feels more to me like something I want to dig into.
Those first, yeah, the very much so. It was an indelible mark that the effect of my local Kansas City's where I grew up, and our local network affiliate, it was a Fox station, had a Friday night creature feature called Crematia's Friday Nightmare, and I would watch Crematia Mortem as she would introduce all of the old classics, and even her little ads during the week, sometimes after cartoons, after school, and then of course the show itself with the opening music and her coming out of a coffin and all of her bits. Just like any good horror host, she was very funny, a really safe space where I got introduced to a lot of stuff that was otherwise pretty much banned in the house I grew up in, because,
Mhm.
it was a pretty religious upbringing. So like rock and horror were very much off the table, as was Dungeons and Dragons. So you can imagine I was very, very immersed in both horror, rock, and D&D every chance I got. So that was it, man. Halloween was always my favorite. I would spend all year prepping for Halloween. I loved, at that point, it wasn't the internet. So it was just like in-person shopping at Woolworths or Montgomery Ward's, looking at the masks when they'd put them on display, rubber masks and silicone masks and costumes and plastic costumes and decorations and records. I've been collecting old Halloween records since I was a little kid. And horror storytelling has always fascinated me. I mean, the Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark series when I was very little boy really affected me. And the movie that probably really stood out was Curse of the Werewolf, the Hammer classic with Oliver Reed. That really grabbed me by the monster cockles, and kind of infected me with the addiction that I have to this day. But so many other things. I mean, I remember like sneaking, Fangorias and reading Fangoria when we'd be at the grocery store, at the bookstore, and like definitely watching, my friends whose parents weren't as restrictive, like, smuggling a VHS of, oh God, like Bordello of Blood, or Wizard of Gore and all that fun stuff. Yeah, man, it was the best. I just I have so many. I remember there was like a little drugstore near us, and they were selling these like bargain bin VHS tapes of the colorized version of Night of the Living Dead. It's the first way that I ever saw Night of the Living Dead, was that weird pastel colorized version they ran out in like the early 80s.
Mhm.
Oh, the list goes on and on. I could talk all day about that. But yeah, I got bit by the bug pretty early, and it's just always been my favorite thing, man.
I kind of feel a little bad for the newer generation. It's so much easier to discover horror with streaming now and Shutter and all these dedicated services. But there was something special about like the bargain bin you mentioned in my hometown. There was a ShopRite, which was our like grocery store, and we go in
Yep.
there, and there was a weird little just section of horror movies when they still sold movies, and
I love that. Yeah.
finding find them in weirdest places. I
Our Piggly Wiggly and our Hy-Vee also had like a little video rental section, which was so
yeah.
weird. But we also had a neighborhood rental shop called Wycliffe Video, where like the teenager behind the counter would never care whatever I wanted to rent. Like, and then we had like a Hollywood Video, which, it's so funny looking back on that. And you're right. I mean, in one sense, I envy. I mean, it's really amazing if you think about the people that are getting turned on to horror right now at this renaissance of horror. I mean, the last couple of years, there's been more high quality, high caliber, blow out your mind horror than you would get in 5 years back in the day when we were kids. Because you got to recognize, like, most of what was being cranked out was schlock. And then we'd get like one really, really good one or two every year. And right now, man, there are some freaking auteurs who would otherwise be making, art house and drama films, who are monster kids who are making horror movies. And I'm really excited for like my kids. They're like going to grow up at a time when like they're exposed to so much good horror. It's awesome.
Well, you mentioned your kids, David. How is it being, kind of like a horror icon and a parent? Is that kind of a weird? I feel like we're in a good place now when it comes to social media, as we get to see a lot of our generation's horror icons talk about having their families and what it's like. We may not have seen that with like a Heather Langenkamp back in the day. She wasn't exactly sharing what it was like to have her family know her as a scream queen. So, what is it like, kind of living in the public eye and being like, I'm a horror icon, but my kids just, care or don't care?
It's interesting. It's really interesting. My kids, are mostly kind of interested in what I do. Sometimes they're bored by it, sometimes they're annoyed by it, and sometimes they're embarrassed by it, but they do love horror, and their friends like horror, and so it's a badge of honor for them to get to be a part of some of the things, or they've been to sets, or they've gotten to be behind the scenes on things that probably otherwise, I would never let them get to watch on screen. And it's really fun, and it's a creative house. My kids are super creative. My son is very into manga, video games, and anime, and my daughter's very into gaming and animals, crystals, making art, and they both collaboratively like kick Halloween's ass every year. They're really, really awesome with that stuff. So it's really fun. I'm really lucky. I can't believe that I get to do what I get to do for a living, and it's really a rad reality that I get to bring my kids around whenever they want to see. Dad at the office is totally more fun than when I used to have to go sit at my dad's office at an engineering firm and just draw on lined paper all day.
Well, since you're talking about the horror stuff, I want to ask, you have worked with kind of like a stable of directors that I think rivals the Leos of the world, right? Like you've made big movies, you've worked with incredible, incredible talents, but you always come back to the horror genre. And as somebody who's, working on a multi-hyphenate career as a writer, as an actor, is that a tricky balance to walk professionally sometimes? Do you ever feel like, oh, I need to go out and do, some art house non-horror film to establish my bona fides, or are you totally secure professionally and personally in that?
I just I've reached an age where I love going to work with people who create an amazing, creatively, supportive, safe, a collaborative space. And so whether that's a, you know, $2 million indie, art house horror film, or it's a big budget, Oscar contender, working with these filmmakers who love what they do, like love the art and really know how to lead and create a space where I can be, liberated to make, big swings and grow as an actor and tell stories. It's like I'm just never certainly never felt like I had some kind of pedigree to protect as an actor. I look, and that's probably because I've never fashioned myself as a I don't know. I'm definitely not a leading man. I never was trying to craft the career of someone like a I don't know. I mean, everybody has their own path. I admire and I love and I look up to so many actors. I'm not as talented nor as versatile. I'll never be Meryl Streep for sure. I'm never going to be Charlize Theron. I'm never going to be Al Pacino, Robert De Niro, Bradley Cooper. I mean, there are these Leonardo DiCaprio. There are people that have their rightful place as like movie stars, Academy Award winning legends of cinema. And there's actors like myself who find a place that we really can thrive and feel free to explore the shadows of supporting characters, or even if it's a bigger role like stuff on the fringe. I'm really comfortable getting as weird and as vulnerable as necessary for whatever the role may ask. And I've always looked to, if I was to say like, who are your, because you go to acting school and you got your friends who are like, oh, I want to be the next Dustin Hoffman, I want to be
Yeah.
the next Marlon Brando, and I was like, oh, I want to be the next Christopher Lee, I want to be the next Peter Lorre, I want to be the next John Cazale, I want to be in our era. For the younger people, it's probably like you look at actors like, I mean, and I'm not saying I'm as good as them, but like you aspire to be the Goldblums, the Turturros, the Buscemi's, the guys who could jump back and forth from a Jurassic Park movie to a small, cool art house indie film to like a really rad horror film to a Coen Brothers movie to you name it. Like, what a dream, man! And I don't think it ever hurts. I don't think. I'd like to think, hopefully, like some auteur art filmmaker wouldn't look down their nose on the fact that I just got covered in gallons of blood and gouged someone's eyeballs out for a film, because it's all storytelling, right?
Well, I mean, to that point, I think the art of character acting is so important to, I mean, the industry itself. Like, and you have established yourself as one of the premier like character actors, and exactly what you're saying. I mean, everything you do is a different personality. You find a different way to bring it, and
Thanks,
that,
man.
that versatility is huge. So, like,
That's really nice.
but when you're doing that though, how are you able to separate between so many things, like going to Polka Dot Man, then going back to horror genre, and how do you create these characters?
Well, I don't think about the genre. I think about the director's vision, the tone, the script, and then I go back to my roots in the theater, where I developed my early toolbox of building the character, which starts with the words, and then and then I build around the words from the script, and I have as much communication as possible with the director, so I understand the tone and the world that they're trying to create, so I can help facilitate that and lend my talents to helping do that. And then I really think about the environment, the world in which the character lives, and I try to figure out what my body would experience that space like, whether it's a supernatural reality, whether it's a futuristic reality, whether it's a very grounded and gritty reality. Doesn't matter. Once you understand that world, that space that you're moving through, then you see how your body moves through it. Then you see how your voice is, shaped by it, how you use your eyes to look, and the character starts to grow from there. So I definitely don't look at doing weird, the Al Yankovic story performance as John Deacon any differently than the way I would approach doing, Lester Billings in, The Boogeyman by Rob Savage, or that I would approach Polka Dot Man in James Gunn's The Suicide Squad, or, any character, you name it. It's like, it's just, it's the work. And sometimes I'm lucky enough that I get to hop from one thing to the next, but usually I get a little bit of ramp up time and prep time. I just this year got to do a long stretch on a new TV show for Apple that's called Murderbot. That'll be coming out sometime next year. And I got to really invest in and spend a lot of time with that character. And then I took a short break and prepped and got ready to go bring Mr. 3 to life for the new Netflix adaptation of One Piece, and that's a whole reality. You're combining the spirit, the tone, the energy of a manga, very, very, very important, history making manga series that also then shaped anime for years, and now is this incredible live action show. It's like you take each job as it comes, and shit, man. I hope I've gotten to fight Dracula. I've gotten to get my ass kicked by Dracula. I would love to play love to play a vampire at some point. There's a lot of roles I've yet to get to do, but I'm so grateful and so lucky. Like you said, I've gotten to do a lot of stuff, work with a lot of great directors, and it's been it's more than I ever deserved or expected. That's for sure.
Far be it from me to disagree with one of our guests, but you said earlier that you're not a leading man, but because of Late Night with the Devil, you're doing the interview junkets. You've got a feature and interview magazine where you're talking to Trent Reznor. You've been nominated for a Saturn Award. That all sounds pretty leading man to me. So I'm curious, after a career where you talk about being somebody who's in service of the director, in the margins, the shadows of a film, what is it like being the one that has to carry the spotlight for a movie?
It's an honor. It's really intimidating. It's very scary. All of it is overwhelming, but it's a great honor, and it's always important to me to lean into things that scare me. So taking on Jack Delroy and playing that role in a film that not only was I going to be on every frame of every shot, I was also going to need to, you know, edify and epitomize the tone, the spirit of Colin and Cameron's vision for the film, and then to get out and promote the film and talk about it, which is one of my favorite parts of producing. I write, produce, and act. I'm not a director. I'm not a composer. I'm not a costume designer. I'm not a production designer. I'm not a lot of things. I wish I was a makeup artist. I always wanted to be a special effects makeup artist, and I suck at it. But I'm very passionate about producing, acting, and writing. And as a producer, getting to help contribute my voice into the way we promoted the film and the way we spread the word about the film, I felt very empowered. I've launched my own production company in the last few years called Good Fiend Films. We do a lot of publishing. We're in, film, television, and now getting into unscripted as well. And it's exciting. It's thrilling. It's scary. You don't want to let down the team. You know that you're the person that most press are going to ask the first questions about because you're front and center in the film. And you just, you have to trust that making the film was so much fun. I kept saying to myself, if audiences like this movie 10% as much as I'm enjoying making it, then we're going to be all right.
Have you practiced and rehearsed all of your non-answers when people inevitably take the conversation to bigger fare to, like, what does James Gunn have for next X, Y, and Z? I feel like that's part of the media training, is you got to be ready to politely give nothing.
I think I learned that over the years. I never got I had some media training since I've actually worked with the same publicist, Jordan Palos, since the beginning. I think since my very first movie with my first time being part of press, which was for the first Ant-Man film, which coincided with the release of a film that I made myself. I wrote, starred, produced, did all of it, called Animals, that was on South by Southwest and Festival Junket. But I remember, she gave me a lot of good advice, but one of those things is just take a breath, feel comfortable saying, "Oh, I'm
Yeah.
not sure." And I learned early not to get my feelings hurt by how much clickbait interviews. It's like people would act like they were interested in talking to me about my little independent film or my comic book, and then they just get one quote about Denis Villeneuve or James Gunn or Peyton Reed or whoever, whatever person I've worked with recently, Christopher Nolan, and that's their headline. David Dastmalchian scoops on James Gunn's process, and you just go like, "What? We talked for 40 minutes, and that was one sentence."
Yep.
The only time it really pissed me off, and I let them know, and I'm not even going to go into too many details because I want people like out digging for it. But I was very clear ahead of time before doing something. I was like, "I'm not talking about this thing. We're not going to talk about this thing." Immediately started talking about it.
Yeah.
And then I was like, "I don't know. I'm not comfortable talking about it." And it was one of those kind of gross things where it wasn't just an interview. It was also to promote like a product that I didn't realize it was such like a thing to promote a product. So anyway, the next day or a few days later, there's an article. It's like David Dastmalchian talks about what's coming up with blah, blah. And I was like, "Are you kidding me?" But you can't get your feelings hurt. This is show business, baby. People are going to do whatever
Yeah.
they can do to get the lights flash and to get the attentions. And I do the same thing. Trust me, when I'm doing the press junket for some big ass movie and I go, you're going to do 5 questions per, and you're doing one of those 8-hour round robin, Zoom junkets where your throat feels like it's going to fall off. And you go, "I'll do 3 about the movie, but you've got to let me talk about Count Crowley or Knights versus Samurai or, Creature Commandos or, the movie that I'm making." So I do it too. And then the press, they kind of look at me like, it's like, this is whatever big outlet or somebody. And they're like, oh, okay, sure. And I just hope they include it,
Yeah.
try and be nice to people. You just got to meet people where they're at, be respectful, try and be cool. People's bullshit meters are so on point. It's like, if you authentically care about something, and you want to, share it with the world, I think there's a way to find, the path. You just have to be creative about it. It's an oversaturated world of digital, promotion. And so finding the way that, like with A Late Night with the Devil, that you can sneak in there and go, "We don't have a marketing budget that is anywhere comparable with what these other companies are putting out, but just try and it's part of the story," right? Like what you
Yeah.
guys are doing is helping me tell the story of Late Night with the Devil. What other things we talk about today? If we're going to talk about the film that I'm excited to talk about, it's like you're helping begin the story. You're part of the almost like the writing process, because it's like somebody that hasn't seen this film yet or hasn't read one of my things and we start talking about it, it's already planting little impressions and seeds and tea leaves in their mind. And how we do that facilitates a conversation with everybody who's listening to your show right now. They should be a part of that conversation. They should be like, I feel like they're being invited in, and the story begins now.
Mm-hmm.
And I do like that the horror genre, to me, and the people who love it are the most curious types of fans, I believe, because talking about Late Night with the Devil, you are correct. That production budget, or sorry, the publicity budget for that, it's a Shudder film. They don't have Universal Studios money or anything like that. And yet it still found tremendous success. Keeping with Shudder, In a Violent Nature, like Shudder broke its own record, I think, like 3 times in the last year just with their own releases. And that is exactly what you're saying. Like maybe Late Night with the Devil doing so well turned people onto Shudder, and that in its own right helped Shudder like promote the next few films. And it's just such a cool thing to see that whoever's talking about it, whether that's us, whether that's people who've seen your movie and love it, horror fans at least want other people to like discover things in a way that I find a little hopeful in like less hopeful times.
Yeah, I agree. And I'm really grateful to be part of the Shudder family. I'm part of some really wonderful horror iconographic families, including Shudder, the Fangoria family. I love IFC and AMC and what they've done. And then I'm really lucky that I'm getting to be a part of the Warner Brothers family and the Universal family. And, I mean, big studios, Disney has been so good to me. I can't say like how weird it is to be a comic nut that Marvel just brought in and didn't put in 1, 2, but 3 films so far, and a TV show, and like I'm really lucky.
I mean, really quickly, like, how does the Fangoria family, especially, I want to ask about, because you do the Fangoria Awards, you jump in to host, and you give your time to give back to like all the horror fans and like the community as well, the people making the movies. I love that, and as you said, you were a horror nut growing up in a place where you had to find your own path. And what does it mean to be presenting awards on behalf of Fangoria now?
It's so incredible. It's so surreal. It's so awesome. I mean, if you looked around what I'm looking at right now in my office, you'd be like, this guy just loves horror, and he's been a diehard. I've got my boxes full of old Fangorias that I've kept, and I've got, um, like I said, this deep, long, lifelong love affair with special effects makeup. It was something that I really wanted to do as a young boy. It's something I practiced and thought I would do, and I even took a years long class in college, and I just didn't have the talent. It requires a patience, talent, and discipline that it wasn't my calling. But I will say one of the most stressful things that happened to me this year, and it's probably silly now looking back on how much energy I wasted thinking about this, but Phil Nobile Jr., who's the editor of Fangoria magazine, was excited to share with me as we were getting ready to do the awards. He's like, "Well, there is an award, and you're going to be getting it yourself." And instead of being happy at first or feeling excited or grateful, I immediately went to this really dark place where I was like, I'm part of the family. Like, I'm friends with you guys. What if people think like you just gave it to me or something like that? So Phil is so sweet. He went through to like show me the data to like demonstrate to me like how it all worked and how, I mean, because I know I vote every year too. I've been voting forever, but like he really broke it down for me by the numbers. And he's like, if at any point you feel, like if anybody says anything, he's like, I can show the people the receipts. And I was like, okay. And then by the time I got to like give my acceptance speech, I was calmed down. But it was intense, man. It's a lot of responsibility. It's a brand and a name that means so much to so many people, myself included, just like Marvel does, just like DC does, just like Image does, just like Dark Horse does, just like, Shudder and IFC do. And when I get to be attached to them, or the name and the face of an adaptation of a Stephen King novel, for God's sake, it's like, holy shit, man, I got to come correct. I want to do right by everybody that's sitting out there right now that's listening, that goes, maybe they didn't necessarily want to be an actor in this stuff, but maybe they just have always loved it and digested it and been fans of it. It's like, I feel an obligation.
Yeah. And I do want to, before we talk about today's film, there is a comic book tie-in to Entrance, and so I want to ask you about your own career in comics too. I was not a comic guy for decades, and then I saw David Pryor's The Empty Man when it came out, and was like, "Oh, I'll check out that comic." And now suddenly I have like 5 long boxes and 600 issues of horror creator-owned comics on my shelves.
Good for you.
So I know I'm very happy. I've made a right decision. But I want to know what it's like to move kind of between these two mediums, and what you think you've learned about film from working on Count Crawley. I made sure I went back and read the trade paperback before today's episode, so it's super fresh in my brain. But it's very cinematic, and I imagine that there's a lot of kind of cross pollination of ideas when you're working between those two mediums.
There is a lot of cross pollination, and the story, the comic book medium has always, to me, reflected a kind of symmetry with cinema. This is Penny, by the way. Hi, Penny. You can say
Hi,
hi.
Penny.
Hi. Can I answer a question for you? I'm doing an interview really quick.
When are we gonna go to Dave and Buster's?
As soon as I'm done with this interview, we're gonna go play video
How
games.
much longer?
It's probably about 20 more minutes.
Daddy, we're hungry.
I know.
We'll make it
Go
fast,
make yourself
Penny.
a snack. Go make yourselves a snack. Guys, I'll be down in just a minute, okay? I promise. And we'll go rock it out. Thank you for that.
Keeping all of it in there. It's staying.
Film is certainly a director's medium. And I look at comic books as like an artist's medium. So even though you are, as the writer of the comic book, serving in a sense a similar role as a director, because in the scripts you're really writing out, sometimes depending on which artist you work with, some pretty specific direction of body movements, action, obviously all the dialogue, which is my favorite part of writing. But there's this beautiful thing that can happen when you're really lost in the pages of a good comic book or graphic novel, and you're just moving through it, and it's the imagery starts to blend and flow, and each page turn, you've got that bated breath, that excitement of what's about to happen next. What's great storytelling? It's just like when you're a little baby. You just want to know what's next, what's about to happen, what comes next. Comic books can do that in such a special way. And horror comics in particular, just the vibe of horror comics since I was a kid. I always loved and gravitated towards creepy and eerie and weird magazine. And then I remember in The Lost Boys when they used like old horror comics as like a guide for how you're going to get the instructions to kill monsters. I was like, oh man, that's so cool. I love it.
Yeah, and you have a lot of really great throwbacks in Crowley in particular to like the EC comics of yesteryear.
Oh, Lucas Kettner, my artist, who we've partnered on every single issue of Count Crowley. He is a genius, a mad genius. He crushes it every time. He is just he's the soul of Count Crowley. And I'm so lucky. If you get a chance, Creature Commandos from DC Horror Presents is currently out in shelves. I've got issue 4 just coming out. It's a 6-issue run to start it up. And if people love and respond to it, I'm excited to keep the story going. And then Knights versus Samurai, even though it is a fantasy story, that is, battle centric based on these, classic warrior classes. There's a ton of monsters. So if you love horror, I was able to incorporate Japanese horror mythology and lore with English horror mythology and lore. And it's really fun watching Japanese warriors battle English monsters and English warriors battling Japanese creatures and vice versa. It's really fun.
Well, I think that brings us
Movie
to talking
time.
about, it is absolutely movie time. So we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we're going to talk about Entrance. We'll be right back. All right, welcome back. So today's film, as Donato said at the top of the episode, is a repeat, and I'm really glad that we are talking about this twice, and we'll get into the why of that. But in case you need a refresher, or if you haven't seen it, a quick plot synopsis for you. For 30-something Susie, life in Los Angeles is hardly the stuff of dreams. And that's okay. She has a job she tolerates, a roommate she likes, and most importantly, a dog she loves. But when that dog runs away, Susie finds herself giving into her loneliness and soon decides that her time in Los Angeles may be coming to an end. But Susie is not alone in life. She has an admirer, one who will not let her leave without giving her one last night to remember. Written by Patrick Horvath and Dallas Halem, and written by Horvath, Halem, Karen Gorham, and Michelle Margolis, Entrance is a slow burn horror that excels at fucking you up. That's the movie. David, this was your pick. What is it about this movie that you love?
I saw Entrance at the Los Angeles Film Festival when I first had come to Los Angeles, maybe 2012, 2011. I think it played the festival circuit like 2010, 2011. And it just bowled me over. There is something about, contained, small budget, independent horror that is performance driven and writing driven, that is not afraid to languish in the discomfort of quiet moments. This movie, to me, hit me at a perfect that's my son Arlo. This movie hit me at a perfect time because I was new, transplant to Los Angeles. I'd lived for a long time in Chicago. I lived in New York briefly. That sense of trying to find your purpose, looking and longing for community and trying to figure out what you're supposed to be doing with your life, how easy it is to feel lost, isolated, separated from the world, especially when you're a young person who has any kind of artistic inclination, a young person who just doesn't know exactly what they're doing with their career, a young person especially who might know what they want to do with their career, but they haven't been able to get the work yet. So they're doing another job that maybe wasn't, what they set out to be doing. All of that stuff just landed, and I was staying in the same area where the film was shot. So I'm walking around, by day, just trying to find, oh my God, how am I going to get my next job? How am I going to pay my rent? Am I going to ever make it as an actor? And then you see this film about this young woman who's just looking for her meaning, her purpose. And she's feeling an instinct, a gut reaction, a nervousness about like, is somebody watching me? Is somebody following me? Is this just anxiety? Is this just depression? Is this just this feeling of, malaise that I've got because I'm going to move and I don't really know what I'm doing and I got to get out of here? I knew all that. I know that well. I still know those feelings. And the movie did such a great job capturing that, and the patience, the confidence with which they shot. I think her performance is just really grounded and so believable.
Mhm.
And I love a movie similar to, like, when you think about Takashi Miike's film Audition. I love a film that isn't afraid to really get you invested in character and world and story. There's a lot of rules, and I write commercial, horror, and I'm write for studios and independent. And like by page 18, we need to have at least one major kill, and we need to have introduced a monster, and we need to have
Yeah.
seen, if it's supernatural, we need to have seen some glimmer of that by page 15. And by this page, we need this. And I understand why those rules exist. They're important rules because they really help, with the kind of life, death, progress that Joseph Campbell laid down from the beginning. But in an independent film like Entrance, what, Patrick and Dallas did and the rest of their team is they allowed us to just get really invested in this young woman and to feel this building sense of dread. And it was super patient. And it's not until the last 20 minutes of the movie that it just rips the head off and
Yep.
unloads on you. And it is so brutal and so rough and so hardcore. Oh man, I was just sitting squirming in a theater in downtown Los Angeles with a bunch of strangers. I loved it.
So I have to ask, David, because we at Brooklyn Horror this year, we recorded an episode with, I assume, mutual friend Sam Zimmerman of Shudder.
Love
And
Sam.
one of the things that he brought up when we were talking about the movie that he had selected is that we as audiences need to be cooler about letting the dog die. That's a little bit overblown. So because dog danger is such a big part of Entrance, where do you sit? You're a writer. Do you kill the dog? Do you keep the dog alive? Where's
I'm
animal cruelty?
unfortunately very superstitious. So I think it's
Mhm.
wonderful when a writer is bold enough to let children and dogs face the perils of mortality
Mhm.
but consistently, if you look at the numbers, it tends to films with the murder or death of a dog, or the murder or death of a young child, they tend to, for some reason, not break out, or they seem to get shut. I don't know what it is, and I'm just so weirdly superstitious about that stuff. So when I'm writing a scene and I'm like, oh man, this dog, it's got to happen, it's gonna happen, and then you go like, oh man. But I actually I haven't. I've had werewolves that you thought were a dog in some of my stuff, where it's like, oh, this poor guy is gonna have to go. But yeah, I mean, I don't want to give any spoilers away, but it's in a recent film that just came out. I was like very proud of when a filmmaker is willing to take 6-year-old children and allow them to be in the face of horror and peril.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think going back to what you were saying though about how Hallam and Horvath kind of they're able to create these characters that you're invested in, and I think that extends also to Los Angeles itself. One of the most important things of this film is how much these filmmakers understand that isolation and loneliness, but specific to Los Angeles. Because I lived in New York City, I lived in the suburbs, and I moved out here to LA, and there is something that is so LA specific about the loneliness you feel out here, and the
Sure,
way they
for sure.
replicate that is on another level. And also the way they do it through voyeurism is just, I think that's the most impressive thing to me. There's so many shots that just linger. The camera is just moving behind the character,
Yeah.
and it is almost like a found footage movie, but it is not. It is still traditionally
It
shot.
puts us almost in the place of the stalker feeling too, but yet you still can associate with the victim, and you just go, how scary it must be to just be a woman sometimes walking around. Like, you just want to walk your dog, you just want to
Yep.
work at a coffee shop, you just want to be able to, like, and without the violent male gaze living over you and lurking over you. And I don't obviously understand it because I've not been in that position, but I certainly can see it and empathize, or at least sympathize for it, because it's like, she's sometimes walking, just like the cars driving by, and the looks that you get, and the men that want to like engage and try and talk to you. And it's like, it would feel authentic if you were stopping and talking to anybody else on the sidewalk. What about that old guy over there with his dog? Why aren't you bothering him? No, it's something threatening. And it's like, here's this poor woman. I shouldn't even say poor woman. Here's this strong, woman who's just questioning, you question yourself. You go, am I just being paranoid now? Am I reading into too much? Have I allowed the boogeyman to rattle me too hard? So maybe I should just like get over it. Let's throw a party. Let's have a good time. I'm going out. I'm leaving. I'm moving. Let's throw a party. Let's have a good time. Oh shit.
Yeah.
Motherfucker shows up and it is brutal. That mask sequence, just the coming in, watching someone sleep, hanging a mask on their, mirror. It's been a long time since I've seen the film, but all those moments and images still stick with me,
Yeah. And I do want to, it's been a minute since you watched it. But I do want to ask, a lot of people in this film came out were a little critical because of the slow burn, because it isn't an overt horror movie until it is. And that takes about 65, 70 minutes to kind of get there. But rewatching it this week, I was struck by how much more tense I found it because I knew already kind of the destination. I knew where it was heading. So speaking about entrance in particular, or just horror movies in general, how much do we factor in as audiences the rewatch and how differently a film plays on screening number 2, screening number 3 than that first experience? Because I liked this the first time we did the episode. I fucking loved this doing this one now because I was just waiting for that release.
I've had that experience with so many films. I highly recommend the rewatch unless you absolutely were just like, I just can't with that movie. I mean, I've had so many rewatches and it's always a really rewarding experience, especially if it's a film that I was like, I really liked that. Oh, that was interesting. Oh, I feel strongly about that.
Yeah.
I've already seen Nosferatu twice. It's only been out for a very short time. And I had a completely deepening experience with the second viewing that I'm so grateful I had, because I was able to see so much stuff that I hadn't noticed before. Going back and I will be going back and watching Entrance again at some point, and I think about other films that I've watched numerous times. There's probably few films that I've watched as many times as like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and every time I see it, it's like there is more detail, more production design, more performance nuance that I love.
Yeah.
I love, 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 love. Yeah. And, just really quick sidebar, Patrick Horvath, who co-created Entrance, such a talented guy, amazing comic book creator, super
Yes.
talented, has a lot of success in that space. Also, just a talented filmmaker, production designer. I don't know if you guys know this. I know I'm friends with Patrick. I mean, you know why I'm friends with Patrick in Dallas? I don't know if I'm friends with them, but I know them is because when I saw Entrance as an aspiring actor who was, going to every film festival I could go to and watching everything I could go to and just trying to find people to collaborate and work with, I would go and find a film like this, and then I would avidly pursue them on social media, get their email. So I reached out to them after I saw the film back in the day and was just like, this movie's incredible. I want to, and we stayed in touch, and now we're, we still know one another. So anyway, I was with Patrick the other day, something I didn't realize he had contributed to, and he did such an amazing job doing it with practical cinema magic, practical effects. He was part of the team, and he really helped design a lot of the beautifully horrific, nuanced shape of the figure, the shape in the night house. So when you see that figure in the deep background moving behind her, and you're like, it was so unnerving. He helped make that. I think that's a cool little tidbit of trivia for all the horror nerds out there.
Well, and so you've mentioned the ending, let's say, twice now, because this film is the payoff is what this makes Entrance. And when I watched it the first time and I had no idea where it was going, same as Monocle, I'm sitting through this movie going, all right, what's going to happen? Where are we going to get to me, it's horrifying for 60 minutes, like Peeping Tom is horrifying. And then it becomes a slasher at the end. And I was like, holy shit, like pedal and metal, where'd this come from? So like in thinking about tonality and thinking about how a horror movie can be more than one thing, more than one subgenre at once, how do you take this ending? Like, do you think it sticks that landing perfectly, transitioning from subgenre to subgenre?
It does. For me, it does. And I don't want to spoil the film for those who haven't seen it yet, but it really, it does what should happen to you when you're watching a horror film, which it totally subverts your expectation, jars you, shakes you, and makes you feel really uncomfortable and scared. And in the end, because it's an independent horror film, it doesn't need to answer the questions. I do think it's important. I think when you're making a larger commercial horror film, there's a kind of obligation to your audience and to kind of that form of asking a big question and trying to answer it, and let's land somewhere. What we do as an audience in Entrance is we get attached to this person, we kind of get lost in this person, we get fear for this person, and then we see what our gut was telling us was coming, but it was worse than we ever even imagined. It ended up being much worse than I was expecting. I remember what I thought
Yeah.
was going to happen to her, and then it was much worse. And then out of this dark, grotesque spirit of obsession, she's forced to just sit with it, which is a beautifully landed, stuck art house ending, in my opinion, that makes it a special film. But it's definitely not like a commercial film where the cops are going to bust in, or we're going to look for the body of the bad guy because he's been shot 20 times and there's just an imprint in the lawn. I love those. Trust me. Those are beautiful movies that need to exist, but this one's special. It's like, oof, it just leaves you with this cold chill. Nobody walks out of this movie just feeling like, oh, dude, that was a blast. That was all. I'm
Yeah.
not going to say it's as mind meldingly disturbing as a film like, say, Speak No Evil, especially the original was, but it definitely gets under your skin in a great way.
Yeah, I mean, can I tell you my favorite part? Honestly, it has nothing to do with the ending, and it's one of those quote unquote smaller moments at the beginning. But it is just this woman who is coming home to her apartment. Her roommate is not around, so she is alone, and her dog is barking when she gets in. And for anyone who's a dog owner, like usually, they run up, greet you when you come home, things of that nature. But the dog is alarmed when she comes home. And to me, like that is one of the scariest parts of the movie
Yep.
because it seems so normal. Of course, whatever, dog's just excited, blah, blah, blah. But in the back of my mind, I'm like, girl alone, apartment, dog freaking out, someone there.
Terrifying.
Right.
Something's bad.
Terrifying. Yeah.
Somebody's in there. Yeah.
It's the subtlety that this movie just gets so right of every little thing is unsettling. And it's also a great movie for me because that ending, let's say that last act, the slasher aspect of it, completely makes you think about everything that has happened to there. You might have been lulled into a false sense of whatever you want to say, maybe just calmness as we're going through. But even if you don't pick up those voyeuristic aspects, the ending makes you look back and go, holy shit, what did I miss?
Yes, absolutely. It really does. Susie Block, what a great performance. I'm looking up to see what else she's done since then. I want to work with her. She does a lot of stuff. Cool. Horror in the High Desert, stand up for something, Help, California.
Yeah.
Okay. I think she's so talented, man.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
This is based on performance. This is one of those great indies that is like, this is going to live or die based on our performance power. And I think across the board, even the party guests, they just seem natural. Awkward, absolutely, but that's also life. I mean, like, how many of us go to a social engagement and just stand there sometimes and stammer awkwardly, or just on podcasts? Like, fucking.
Well, we're almost done. We've got one last question we're going to ask. But before we get to that, I do want to talk about anxiety for a second. When this film came out in 2012, Stephen King, when he was still writing for Entertainment Weekly, wrote about it because he couldn't get it off his mind. And he wrote, "My anxiety built up to almost Blair Witch Project levels. You know something awful is going to happen. And then there comes a point where you wish it would so you could relax." As I was watching it, knowing you were going to be talking about it, I found myself thinking a little bit about Late Night with the Devil and how that's also a film where you spend most of it waiting for the bad thing to happen. The bad thing does not happen until the very, very end. How do you feel? Like, a lot of people talk about fear and scare when it comes to horror. I've always gravitated towards anxiety. How do you feel about the denial of release on whatever fear or thing that you're thinking is about to happen is going to happen?
It's like the catharsis of horror cinema. One of the great joys of it, the high we get is that release, is that like, oh, I've been dreading this, it's finally happened, and then it's over, and then you remember we're safe. Here we are, we're back together, we're sitting on our couch, we're sitting in front of our laptop, we're sitting in a movie theater. When you deny that of the audience, you have to have a good reason. Don't do it just for effect, but it can be a really powerful tool in the way you toy with people's viewing emotions. And I think it's incredible. With Late Night with the Devil, I knew we were building towards a gonzo, balls to the wall, crazy finale.
Oh yeah.
And so trying to layer in all these little tendrils and emotional connections to the different states of being that led to this moment for Jack were so important to me, because I wanted the audience to really, by the time we reach that point, not be bored, because that's the worst insult to, that's the worst feeling. But more than that, I wanted people so engrossed, so engaged that they gave a shit. I want you to care, even if he had made some really, really ridiculously lame or selfish, decisions in his life and in his career. If he had done some really crappy stuff, I wanted you to still feel like you gave a shit, like you cared what was going to happen. And that happens in spades in the movie Entrance, and in films like this of this caliber,
Yeah. And giving a shit, that brings us to our last question. We always ask our guests how they think that the movie that they brought to us is going to find its audience over time. Entrance is a very, very small movie. It is small even among horror fans. I think it's one that a lot of people haven't had an opportunity yet to go back and rediscover. So how do you think that time will be kind to Entrance in the years ahead?
I think hopefully with podcasts, shows like this, fellow filmmakers talking about it, just giving, you got to shine a light on stuff, man. Got to shine a light. Who knows? Maybe somebody listening to this sees it, and then they pass it on to somebody else, and they pass it on to somebody else. I know when I'm out doing, interview circuits and stuff, it's a film of reference that I'll pull up among many others that I hope people will check out. But we shall see. We shall see. Who knows? It's always weird. Like, what are the comics that keep life? Like 3 years later, there's still a trade paperback on the shelf of this, but not that. Why did this
Yeah.
stick and that didn't? Why is this film something that got a franchise and this other film, didn't go? It's interesting. I guess time will tell.
Yeah, I think, not to rehash the conversation I had on Jackson's episode, but this movie needs to be talked about within the realms of voyeuristic cinema. I think, again, talking about a Rear Window or a Peeping Tom obviously as classic examples, but then using something like Entrance, or there's a found footage movie called like Lucky Bastard about a porn star and found footage horror and stalkers and obsession. So as journalists, it's our job to write those top 10 lists that it pays the SEO clicks. We got to do that. Hey, 10 best voyeurism movies. But when you do that list, you got to stick stuff like Entrance on there. You got to put the underseen stuff. So I think that is on us a little bit as the people seeing the movie, and especially like a critic or a journalist, to make sure that these smaller movies like an Entrance find their way into conversations where they belong, but might not usually come up.
Yeah, I agree. And I appreciate it when people are willing to take that little space that they've got in their corner of media and go, here we go, put it out there. That's really special. And it's what I love about people who love movies, because they've always got that thing up their sleeve that I had never heard of. I love that you guys have this show, and I think it's such a great concept for a show.
We appreciate that. And we appreciate you for coming on the show today. I know that you're a busy guy. I know that you're in the middle of hyping up for the end of the year crowd, Late Night with the Devil. So if folks want to stay connected with you, if they want to see one of the bajillion projects you've got in the pipeline right now, where do you like to connect with your fans? What's your social media website? Where do they go?
I am on Instagram at Dastmalchian, so at Dastmalchian. And then we do have a website for my production company, although right now just news and information up there about the different projects that we've worked on and are working on. That's goodfiendfilms.com. And there is a Facebook page that I don't tend to, but that's okay. And keep your eyes peeled. If you get a chance, please go to your local comic shop, support local comic shops. They need your help. And even if you don't buy my comics, go and see what grabs your attention, see what grabs your eye. Take a look at, if you would be so kind, Count Crowley, Knights versus Samurai, Creature Commandos. I also have some horror one-shots out there like The Headless Horseman and DC Horror Presents. And then, if at this point you haven't gotten to see Late Night with the Devil yet, please check it out. Go on your Shudder, go to Hulu, just rent it, and I'll come to your house personally and thank you.
He'll know. David will know.
I will know.
How do folks stay connected with you during this holiday season, Donato?
Yeah, you can follow me as always at Donatobomb, DONATOBOMB, and that'll be Blue Sky, Instagram, and Letterboxd most primarily. TikTok, if it does not get banned, I will start using that. And yeah, a lot of end of year coverage coming up, even though this will be posting in January. So we are in a new year, and yet there still is so much coverage to get out there. Daily Dead will have my top 10 horror movies of the year. Letterboxd will have plenty more. And yeah, let's look forward to what's coming in 2025, baby. I already secretly saw something that I think is going to be one of my favorite horror movies of the year.
Please don't talk about that movie. You know how emotionally upset I get that I haven't seen it yet.
What movie? I don't know what you're talking about.
I don't know either. As for myself, you can follow me on Blue Sky. It's Monogle at the Blue Sky chart string. Please also follow Certified Forgotten. We are in the waning hours of our site migration. We are about to pop back up into existence with a brand new web host. It's going to be a really great site. As we've talked about, we're on the same web host as Defector and some of those other writer-owned publications, so we're excited to be there. Subscribe if you like this podcast. We don't have any other with David, but we have some amazing, amazing guests in our 4 years of running this thing. I can't believe that's the right answer. So like and subscribe. We'd love you to do so. And David, thank you so much. We hope you have a wonderful, wonderful rest of your holiday season, and we will see you again in 2025.
Thank you, gentlemen. Happy New Year.
Double dipping.